Aliens, The False Crusade, by Saren Ong. The night before Dorlium lay heavy upon the plain like a wet cloak. The camp of the Schwarzer Adler mercenaries spread in ordered rows beyond the greater sprawl of the Crusader host. Thousands of small cook fires flickered in the darkness, each one haloing men who had marched from lands they would never see again. The air smelled of damp canvas, horse sweat, tallow smoke, and unwashed flesh. Somewhere to the south, wolves howled beyond the low ridges of Anatolia, their cries thin against the vastness of the steppe. Siegfried Heinrich knelt outside his tent with his longsword resting across his knees. The blade caught the firelight as he drew the whetstone along its edge in slow, deliberate strokes. Steel rasped softly. His movements were measured, almost gentle, as if he were tending a living thing rather than preparing an instrument meant to split men open from collarbone to hip. He had done this ritual before every battle for 10 years. He had been 16 when he first followed a banner not belonging to his lord. Now he was 26, thick in the shoulders, scarred across his forearms, with a nose that had once been straight. His hands bore the hard lines of a plowman despite the sword. In his mind he saw Goslar, the fields in spring when the soil turned black and soft beneath the plow. His father's back bent under the same land that another man claimed. His mother's hands cracked from cold water in winter. They had tilled the earth for decades and would die with nothing but rented ground beneath their boots. Tenant farmers always paying, never owning. He pressed the whetstone harder. He did not march for God. He did not care for Jerusalem. He marched for silver. Enough silver to buy the land outright. Enough to place a deed in his father's hands so the old man would die knowing the earth beneath him belonged to his bloodline. Steel hissed under stone. Around him, mercenaries laughed quietly. Some sharpened axes. Others patched mail with wire. One man vomited into the dirt from spoiled wine. Another prayed loudly in Saxon dialect, beseeching saints to watch over him. Siegfried had long ago learned that the loudest prayers often came from the most frightened men. A shadow fell across him. "Still courting your blade?" Siegfried did not look up. "She answers better than most women." Reinhard Ulrich stood before him, hands clasped behind his back. He wore no helm, only a dark gambeson beneath a mail hauberk. His hair, lighter than Siegfried's, was bound at the nape of his neck. Though younger by 2 years, Reinhard carried himself with the authority of a man who had grown accustomed to command. He was the second son of Baron Ulrich. Second sons inherited nothing but expectation. Reinhard had been raised in stone halls, educated in Latin and law, trained in arms alongside his elder brother. But when inheritance was discussed, his name had been spoken only in the context of marriage alliances or minor church appointments. He had chosen neither. Instead, he gathered men who were willing to follow coin rather than bloodline, and founded the Schwarzer Adler, the Black Eagle, under his own banner. He had not done it in rebellion. He had done it in refusal. "I need you close tomorrow," Reinhard said quietly. Siegfried lifted his eyes. "I am always close. Closer." Reinhard crouched beside him, lowering his voice further. "There are knights among the coalition who believe mercenaries are dogs they may kick. Jacques Chastain most of all." Siegfried's mouth tightened. The French Viscount's son had made his disdain clear since their arrival. Fine armor, polished surcoat, jeweled sword hilt. He spoke to hired men as if addressing livestock. "I will not offend him," Siegfried said, "unless he offends first. That is what concerns me." Reinhard reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a small clay jar sealed with wax. He handed it to Siegfried. "Ointment, from a physician in Nicaea. Crushed poppy, willow bark, wine resin. If you are cut deeply, smear it inside the wound before binding. It will dull pain long enough to fight or flee." Siegfried weighed the jar in his palm. "You keep this for yourself. I have another." A pause settled between them. In the distance, the city of Dorylaeum loomed dark against the starlit horizon. Its walls were low compared to the great fortresses of Europe, but solid. Beyond them, the Seljuk garrison waited. Scouts had reported mounted archers within the region, horsemen who could loose arrows at full gallop and vanish like smoke. "You think they will ride out?" Siegfried asked. "I think pride will make someone foolish," Reinhard replied. He stood. "Stay by my side, and if Chastain provokes you, remember why you are here." "For land," Siegfried said. "For your future." Reinhard clasped his shoulder briefly before turning away. Siegfried watched him go. He had followed Reinhard for 6 years. He trusted him more than any priest or lord. Reinhard did not waste men for vanity. He paid fairly. He listened. He did not preach. The whetstone rasped one final time. Siegfried tested the edge with his thumb. Sharp enough to shave flesh. Sharp enough to open a man from navel to sternum. He slid the blade into its scabbard and rose. The wolves howled again. And somewhere beyond the ridges, unseen in the deeper darkness of the Anatolian hills, something else watched the lights of the Crusader host with unblinking patience. Morning broke in dust. The Crusader vanguard formed ranks beneath banners bearing crosses of red and gold. Clerics rode along the lines chanting blessings. Horses stamped nervously, sensing tension. The Schwarzer Adler assembled under their black eagle standard, 50 heavy infantry, 20 mounted lancers, a handful of crossbowmen. Not the largest company in the host, but disciplined. Trumpets sounded. The advance began. They approached Dorylaeum in loose formation. Siege engines were few. This was not a protracted encirclement, but an opportunistic assault. Arrows began to fall before noon. Seljuk horse archers emerged in waves beyond the city, loosing shafts and arcs that darkened the sky. The arrows struck shields with dull thuds, punched through mail at close range, pierced throats where visors were raised too early. A man 3 paces to Siegfried's left screamed as an arrow entered beneath his jaw and exited through the back of his neck. Blood fountained bright against the dust. "Shields high!" Reinhard shouted. The mercenaries locked formation. The Crusader knights made a half-hearted push toward the gates, but the Seljuk cavalry harried their flanks relentlessly. Horses screamed as arrows lodged in eyes and lungs. By mid-afternoon, confusion spread. Then came the order to withdraw. It moved through the lines unevenly. Retreat. Fall back. Reform beyond bow range. Siegfried felt the tension ripple. Retreats were the most dangerous maneuver on any battlefield. Men turned their backs. Lines loosened. Panic was a living thing. He kept pace beside Reinhard as they withdrew across the plain, arrows striking the ground around them. Behind the walls of Dorylaeum, Farajasim watched from the battlements. He saw Christians retreating. He saw disorder. He saw glory. Hamid Abbas stood at his side. "It is too clean," Hamid murmured. "They draw us out." Farah laughed. "You see traps where there are none. Our archers hold advantage from the walls, and surrender the chance to crush them entirely? No." Farah turned to his officers. "Open the gates. We ride." Hamid's jaw tightened, but command was command. The gates groaned open. Seljuk cavalry surged from the city like a released tide, banners snapping, hooves thundering. They pursued the retreating Crusaders into the open field. And then the horn sounded. From behind a low ridge to the west, 400 mounted knights erupted into view, lances lowered, armor gleaming. They descended like an avalanche of iron. The Seljuk line, extended and committed, had no time to wheel. Impact came with a sound like timber splitting. Lances punched through lamellar armor. Horses collided chest to chest. Men were thrown beneath hooves and crushed into the earth. The air filled with the wet crack of bones breaking under the weight of charging destriers. Siegfried turned at the sound and saw the Seljuk formation split cleanly in two. "Forward!" Reinhard roared. The mercenaries wheeled and charged back into the fray. Steel met flesh at arm's length. Siegfried drove his blade into a rider's thigh, felt it grind against femur before wrenching free. Blood sprayed hot across his face. An arrow struck his shield and buried halfway through the wood. A Seljuk warrior swung a curved blade toward his head. Siegfried stepped inside the arc and hacked downward, cleaving collarbone and rib. The man collapsed with a wet choking sound, lungs filling. To the east, Jan Barbier rode hard toward Jacques Chastain. His face was calm. His sister's face burned in his mind. He closed the distance amid chaos. Jacques fought ahead, unaware. Jan rose in his stirrups and swung. The blade cut air. Jacques' horse stumbled over a corpse, pitching him forward. Jan's strike carved only a shallow line across Jacques' helm. Jacques turned in fury, but the battle swallowed them before recognition could form. Elsewhere, Hamid Abbas gathered retreating men. "Back to the gates," he shouted in Turkish. "Regroup." He formed a defensive knot of archers and spearmen, covering the withdrawal. Farah Jassim, thrown from his horse, found himself surrounded by armored Christians before he could rise. He was dragged from the field in chains. By sunset, Half the Seljuk force lay dead across the plain. The Crusaders cheered weakly. The ground was mud with blood. Crows had already begun to gather. Siegfried wiped his blade on a fallen man's cloak. He did not cheer. He had seen too many fields like this. And as dusk crept over Dorylaeum, and the wounded cried out for water and mothers long dead, a faint tremor stirred in the hills 15 miles away. Eggs, long dormant in resin-dark silence, quivered at the vibration of distant slaughter. The hunt had begun. The dead were not buried before nightfall. There were too many of them. They lay where they had fallen, faces turned to the sky, eyes already clouding as flies gathered in black clusters around mouths and wounds. Some still breathed in shallow, bubbling gasps, their intestines coiled in the dirt beside them like discarded rope. The surgeons moved among them with knives and saws, deciding who could be saved and who would be granted mercy by steel. Siegfried stepped over a man whose leg had been crushed flat beneath a horse. The bone had split through skin in white splinters. The man clutched at passing boots, begging in a dialect Siegfried did not understand. A priest knelt beside him, murmuring absolution. Then a dagger slid between the ribs. The begging stopped. Reinhard stood near a makeshift holding area where Seljuk prisoners were bound in groups. Farah Jassim was among them, wrists tied behind his back with coarse rope, his lamellar armor stripped away. Blood ran from a gash above his brow into one eye, but his posture remained rigid. "You pursued," Reinhard said quietly to him in broken Arabic. Farah stared forward. "You retreated," Farah replied in accented Frankish. "Like cowards." Reinhard did not smile. "You opened your gates." Farah's jaw tightened. Nearby, Jack Chastain dismounted in a flourish of dust and disdain. His surcoat, once bright with heraldic embroidery, was stained dark with blood, not all his own. He removed his helm and handed it to a squire. His eyes found Reinhard. "And there he is," Jacques said loudly enough for others to hear. "The merchant prince." Reinhard turned slowly. "I was not aware you addressed me." Jacques gestured toward Farah. "The Seljuk commander is of noble blood. He is my prisoner by right of lineage. I demand custody." Siegfried, standing a few paces behind Reinhard, felt tension ripple through the mercenaries nearby. Hands drifted closer to sword hilts. Reinhard's voice remained even. "He was taken by my men." "He was taken under the banner of the Crusade," Jacques snapped, "which I serve as a noble sworn." "And I serve as a contractor under agreed terms," Reinhard replied. "He will be ransomed." Jacques' lip curled. "You haggle over heathens?" "I haggle over opportunity." A few nearby knights shifted uncomfortably. Jacques stepped closer. "Name your price." 5,000 silver denarius. The number hung in the air like an insult. Jacques laughed, sharp and incredulous. "For this dog?" "For a commander," Reinhard corrected. Jacques leaned in. "You forget your place, and you forget yours." Steel whispered from scabbards. It happened quickly. One of Jacques' knights shoved a mercenary. A mercenary struck back with a mailed fist. A sword came free. Then the camp erupted into violence. Siegfried moved without hesitation. A knight lunged toward Reinhard. Siegfried intercepted, catching the man's wrist and driving his pommel into the knight's face. Teeth shattered. Blood sprayed across the dirt. Another swung low. Siegfried stepped aside and cut upward through the knight's thigh, severing muscle. The man collapsed screaming, clutching the wound as blood pulsed between his fingers. The mercenaries fought in tight formation, disciplined. They did not chase. They did not overextend. Jacques found himself knocked to the ground, a boot pressed to his chest, blade hovering inches from his throat. It was Siegfried's blade. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, Siegfried considered ending him. Reinhard's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" The mercenaries disengaged as one. Jacques scrambled to his feet, face flushed with humiliation. "This is not finished," he spat. Reinhard sheathed his sword. "It is finished for tonight." Jacques backed away, gathering his injured knights. The defeat would fester. Siegfried watched them retreat. "You should have let me kill him," he muttered. "No," Reinhard said softly. "Not yet." Night deepened. Fires burned low. The wounded moaned in their sleep or in delirium. The smell of blood thickened as it cooled. In Jacques' camp, anger roiled. He sat beneath his banner while a physician stitched the shallow groove across his helm's rim where Jan's blade had scraped. A knight approached, hesitant. "My lord?" "What?" Jacques snapped. "There are whispers." Jacques' eyes narrowed. "Of what?" That during the battle, Sir Yan rode behind you and swung. Silence stretched. Jack dismissed the physician with a flick of his hand. Find him. We have searched the outer perimeter. Search again. And if he has fled, Jack's voice dropped, then he will not flee far. 15 miles away, Yan Barbier stumbled through narrow canyon rock. His horse had thrown a shoe hours earlier and gone lame. He had slit its throat with shaking hands and left it for scavengers. The canyon walls rose jagged on either side, cutting out the moon. Wind moaned through the stone corridors. He did not know where he was going, only away. His sister's face would not leave him. The memory of her tears, the Lord's laughter, the confession and whispers of what had been done. Yan had sworn to kill him. He had almost done it. Almost. He cursed softly. The canyon widened into a basin scattered with scrub brush and twisted stone. At its far end, half concealed by shadow, was a dark opening in the rock face. A cave. Yan hesitated only a moment before approaching. Inside, the air was damp, cool, still. He stepped cautiously, hand resting on his sword hilt. The scent struck him first, sweet, rotting, like meat left in sun too long. He advanced a few paces further, his boot stuck. He looked down. A black, glistening substance coated the ground, resinous, thick as pitch. He frowned. The walls shimmered faintly in reflected moonlight filtering through the entrance. They were not natural stone alone. They were layered in something organic. Yan swallowed. A sound echoed deeper within, wet, rhythmic. He moved forward despite instinct screaming otherwise. The tunnel widened into a chamber, and he froze. Shapes hung along the walls, human shapes, men, crusaders, Seljuks, bound upright in hardened resin. Their mouths were open in silent screams. Some were dead, some were not. One man's eyes rolled wildly as Yan stared. Something moved near his chest. Yan stepped closer despite horror rooting him. The man convulsed. His ribcage bulged outward, then exploded. Blood and fragments of bone sprayed across Yan's face as a pale, serpentine creature tore free in a spray of gore, screeching as it slid to the floor. Yan staggered backward. On the chamber floor lay enormous leathery eggs, each nearly the size of a shield. One split open. A spider-like thing launched toward him. Yan threw himself aside, blade flashing. The creature struck the rock where his head had been. Its tail whipped violently. It skittered toward him again, legs clicking. He brought his sword down with all his weight. The blade cleaved through it. Clear fluid sprayed across the resin. It hissed. The resin smoked faintly. Yan stared at the severed creature twitching on the ground. Behind him, deeper in the hive, something heavy shifted. A low, vibrating hiss rolled through the chamber. Yan did not wait. He fled. Behind him, movement stirred in the darkness. In the Crusader camp, dawn came gray and uneasy. 2 men were missing from the night watch. Their bedrolls lay undisturbed. No blood, no signs of struggle. Siegfried frowned as he examined the ground. Tracks, dragged, but not by horses. Reinhard crouched beside him. Wolves? One mercenary suggested. No, Siegfried said quietly. The drag marks were smooth, deliberate, as if something strong had lifted and pulled without stumbling. Elsewhere, within Dorilaeum's battered walls, Hamidas oversaw the regrouping of what remained of the Seljuk defenders. Reports reached him by midday. 3 scouts gone. A stable boy vanished. A guard found half dissolved in an alley, armor melted into flesh by some corrosive agent. Hamid knelt beside the corpse. The man's torso was eaten through in a circular hole. Bone edges were charred, flesh blackened. No blade did this. No arrow. Farah Jassim remained bound under watch in the Crusader camp, ignorant of what now stalked his city. By sunset, whispers had spread. Men claimed to have seen something tall moving along the ridges at twilight. Black, inhuman. Some swore they heard clicking in the dark. Fear moved faster than reason. A priest declared demons had been summoned by heathens. A mullah inside the city proclaimed the Christians consorted with devils. Accusations hardened into anger. The fragile pause after battle shattered. On the 3rd day after Dorilaeum, both armies prepared again for violence. Not knowing the true enemy moved beneath their feet, within resin-dark tunnels, multiplying. And far above, hidden upon a distant rise where no banner flew, a cloaked figure observed through lenses that glowed faint green. It tilted its masked head as it watched human formations reassemble. The experiment was progressing. The worthy would be revealed. The weak would be consumed. The tension did not break all at once. It curdled. On the fourth morning after the battle, a Seljuk patrol rode out beneath the eastern gate of Dorylaeum to recover bodies from the field before rot made them unrecognizable. The sun had not yet burned away the mist that clung low across the plain. They did not return. At first, no one thought much of it. Patrols were often delayed by scavengers or Christian stragglers. But when a second patrol rode out to investigate and one horse came back riderless, its flanks streaked with something dark and smoking, unease rippled through the defenders. Hamed Abbas examined the horse himself. The saddle leather had been eaten through. A hole the size of a fist gaped in the animal's ribcage. The edges of bone were pitted and blackened as if dissolved by lye. The smell was wrong. Not the smell of blade or fire. Something sharper, chemical, bitter. Hamed looked toward the distant Christian camp. If this was some weapon, it was one he had never seen. Across the field, the Crusaders faced similar horror. 2 bodies were found half a mile from the main encampment. One had been stripped of armor. The other was still in mail. Both were missing heads, not cut cleanly. Torn, the vertebrae had been ripped apart rather than severed. Siegfried knelt over one corpse, jaw set. The chest cavity was open, not split by sword, broken from within. The ribs had been forced outward, splintered. The organs were gone. Flies buzzed in the cavity. He reached down and touched the edges of bone, smooth in places, melted. He wiped his fingers on the dead man's tunic. This was not wolves, one mercenary muttered. No, Siegfried said. Reinhard stood behind him, silent. A delegation of knights approached under banner of truce before noon. Jacques Chastain rode at their head. His humiliation had not softened him. You release demons upon the field, Jacques declared loudly. Men are taken in the night, corpses found desecrated. Reinhard's eyes narrowed. We release nothing. Jacques gestured toward the east. Your prisoners perhaps call upon devils. Your arrogance blinds you, Reinhard replied coolly. Siegfried stepped forward. Our dead are butchered the same. Jacques looked at him with thinly veiled contempt. Then perhaps your God punishes you. I have no God, Siegfried answered flatly. That silenced a few nearby. Jacques scoffed. We will settle this. And he turned his horse back toward the Crusader lines. Within the hour, skirmishes erupted along the edges of the field. Arrows flew, spears clashed. The fragile ceasefire collapsed under suspicion. From the battlements of Dorylaeum, Farah Jassim, still bound but allowed to observe under guard, smiled grimly as Christians and Muslims renewed slaughter. But Hamed did not smile. He had walked the alleys that morning. He had seen something worse. Near the northern wall, in a half-collapsed storage building, he had found a man fixed upright against the stone. Not by rope, by hardened black substance. The man's eyes had been wide and bloodshot. His abdomen moved faintly. When Hamed approached, the man whispered something. Inside. Then his chest convulsed. Hamed stepped back instinctively. The ribs split. Blood sprayed across the stone. And a pale creature tore free, shrieking with a sound unlike any animal of earth. Hamed had drawn his blade and cut it in two. Clear fluid sprayed the floor and hissed against the stone. The stone smoked. The fluid burned through leather boots. Hamed's calf blistered where droplets struck exposed skin. He killed the man with a thrust to the throat to end his agony. Then he ordered the building burned. But even as flames consumed the structure, he knew it was too late. Something had nested. Now as battle reignited outside the city walls, that nest stirred. The Crusaders advanced again toward Dorylaeum's gates in force. Siege ladders were dragged forward, shields locked tight. Siegfried marched in the front rank of the Schwarzer Adler. Arrows rained from the walls. Men fell. One bolt from a crossbow struck a Seljuk defender through the eye. He toppled backward from the parapet. Another Crusader took an arrow through the armpit gap in his mail. The shaft punched into lung. He coughed pink foam as he fell. Forward, Reinhard roared. They reached the outer ditch. Ladders went up. Steel met steel at the crest. Siegfried climbed, shield strapped to his forearm, sword clenched in his fist. A spear thrust down at him. He knocked it aside and drove upward, blade punching through groin and into belly. Warm viscera spilled over his arm as he shoved the dying man off the ladder. He hauled himself onto the wall. Chaos exploded around him. Knights hacked at defenders. Seljuk archers fought with daggers. Men slipped on blood-slick stone and fell screaming into the ditch below. And then something leapt from the inner courtyard onto the battlement. It moved with terrifying speed. Black. glossy, tall as a man but wrong in proportion, elongated skull, ribbed exoskeleton, tail whipping behind it like a scythe. For half a heartbeat, both sides stared. Then it struck. Its claws punched through a Crusader's helm and skull in one motion. The body jerked and went limp before being flung aside like refuse. A Seljuk spearman lunged. The creature's tail snapped forward, impaling him clean through the chest. The tip burst from his back in a spray of blood. Siegfried saw the creature up close now. No eyes. A smooth dome reflecting the carnage. Its inner jaws shot forward from within its mouth and smashed through another man's face, retracting slick with brain matter. Someone hacked at its shoulder. The blade bit. Clear fluid sprayed across the attacker's arm. He screamed as the liquid burned through mail, through flesh, exposing bone beneath in seconds. The creature hissed. More of them emerged from stairwells and shadowed corridors. 3, 5, 10. They climbed the walls like insects, claws finding purchase in stone. Panic shattered formation. Demons! Someone screamed. Siegfried did not scream. He stepped back into Reinhardt's side. Hold! Reinhardt bellowed. Form! A xenomorph lunged. Siegfried met it with a downward cut that glanced off its exoskeleton, sparks flashing. The creature's tail whipped toward his throat. He dropped flat. The barb sliced the air above him. Reinhardt drove a spear into its torso. The spear pierced. Acid blood erupted. The wooden shaft dissolved instantly, and droplets splashed onto Reinhardt's gauntlet. Smoke rose. He tore the gauntlet free and flung it aside before the acid reached skin. The creature convulsed and fell from the wall into the ditch below. Below them, the field devolved into horror. Xenomorphs burst from drainage tunnels and shattered doors within the city. They fell upon Crusaders and Seljuks alike. A knight on horseback attempted to ride one down. The creature leapt, claws sinking into the horse's neck. Acid blood sprayed as the knight's sword bit deep. The horse collapsed screaming, its chest cavity dissolving into ruin. Men ran. Others froze and died where they stood. Hamed Abbas saw the chaos from the inner courtyard. He understood at once. This is not their doing, he muttered. He shouted orders. Close the gates. Fall back to interior streets. Farajassim, still bound but guarded nearby, laughed hysterically. You see? God favors us. A xenomorph dropped from a rooftop behind him. Its claws tore through Farah's spine before he could finish the sentence. The Seljuk commander died with surprise frozen on his face. Hamid did not hesitate. He seized a fallen torch and hurled it into a cluster of resin coating a nearby archway. The resin ignited violently. Flames spread. A xenomorph shrieked as fire engulfed it, thrashing wildly before collapsing in charred ruin. Fire! Hamid shouted. Burn everything! Outside the walls, Jack Chastain rallied knights into a wedge formation. Push through, he roared. They are few. He believed this. He believed everything could be crushed under enough noble will. Siegfried grabbed his arm. Pull back. Jack jerked free. Stand aside, dog. Another xenomorph erupted from beneath a fallen cart and dragged a knight screaming into shadow. Jack faltered. The reality of it began to fracture his certainty. Reinhard seized the moment. Withdraw. He commanded his mercenaries. They fought in tight defensive formation, shields interlocked, retreating step by bloody step down the ladder and across the field. Behind them, Dorlium became a slaughterhouse. Acid hissed against stone. Men burned. Men dissolved. Men were taken alive. By nightfall, both armies had broken. Seljuks retreated deeper into the city. Crusaders fell back to the plain. Between them, the no-man's land was littered not just with human dead, but with the black bodies of slain xenomorphs, their acid blood carving smoking pits into earth and armor alike. The war between faiths had become something else, and as darkness fell fully, shapes moved across the battlefield, dragging the wounded Christian and Muslim alike back toward the hills, toward the hive. Above the carnage on the same distant ridge, the cloaked observer remained still. Through its mask, heat signatures flickered. It had seen courage, it had seen panic, it had seen adaptation. The hunt was not yet complete. The night after the wall ran black with more than shadow. The plain between the Crusader encampment and the battered city of Doraleum smoldered in scattered fires where resin had burned and armor still hissed from acid scars. The wind carried the stench of cooked flesh and dissolved bone. No songs rose from the Christian camp. No calls to prayer echoed from the city. only the distant, intermittent scream of men who had not yet died. Siegfried sat on an overturned shield near the Schwarzer Adler banner, wiping his blade clean for the third time. It did not matter how thoroughly he scraped it. Faint pitting marred the steel where drops of the creature's blood had struck and eaten at the metal. Around him, the mercenaries counted their losses. 4 dead on the wall, 3 missing, 2 so badly burned by acid that their flesh sloughed in strips when the physician attempted to dress them. One of those men had begged for amputation of the arm where acid had eaten through mail and into muscle. They had bound him to a cartwheel while the surgeon sawed through bone. He lived, for now. Reinhard stood at the edge of the camp, staring toward the city. His right forearm was wrapped in linen, where a stray droplet had splashed skin after melting through his gauntlet. The burn was deep but narrow, a smoking coin-sized pit of flesh. He had not cried out when it happened. Now he flexed his fingers slowly, testing strength. Siegfried approached him. "They do not attack again," Siegfried said. "Not yet. You saw how many." Reinhard nodded. "They are not mindless." No, they both knew that now. The creatures did not simply charge blindly. They struck from shadow. They withdrew when fire spread. They targeted isolated men first. They learned. In the distance from within the walls, flames flared briefly, then died. Hamid Abbas was burning entire quarters of the city in desperate attempt to deny the hive shelter. But it was already too large. Before dawn, a rider approached under white cloth. He bore no visible weapon. Crusader archers drew arrows but did not loose. The rider stopped well beyond bow range and raised both hands. A translator was fetched. Siegfried watched from behind Reinhard as the exchange took place. The rider spoke in Turkish, voice steady despite what he had witnessed. Hamid Abbas proposed a parley. Reinhard exchanged glances with several Crusader captains nearby. Pride warred with terror in their eyes. Jack Chastain arrived late to the gathering, face pale beneath grime. "What trick is this?" he demanded. Reinhard answered before any noble could. "If they wished to trick us, they would open the gates again." Jack bristled but did not counter. They agreed to meet at midday between lines. When the sun reached its zenith, a small group advanced from the city. Hamid Abbas walked at their center. He wore no helmet. His lamellar armor was scorched in places. One sleeve was stiff with dried blood not his own. Reinhard stepped forward to meet him, Siegfried at his right. They stopped 20 paces apart. No banners, no chants, only wind and the flies. Hamid spoke first, in careful Frankish. "You have seen them." Reinhard inclined his head slightly. "We have. They take us in the night. They take us as well." Silence lingered. Hamid's gaze shifted briefly to Siegfried. There was intelligence there. Calculation. "We did not summon them," Hamid said. "Nor did we." Behind Reinhard, Jock muttered something about heathen lies. Hamid ignored him. "They breed," Hamid continued, "inside living men." A murmur rippled through the Crusader line. Siegfried's jaw tightened at the memory of the man on the wall convulsing before rupture. "How many?" Reinhard asked. Hamid's answer was quiet. "Too many." Another silence. Jack stepped forward suddenly. "Open your gates and surrender the city," he demanded. "We cleanse it together under Christian command." Hamid's eyes hardened. "You will die inside those walls." Jack sneered. "We do not fear. You should," Siegfried cut in flatly. Jack rounded on him. "Silence." Hamid watched the exchange with interest. Reinhard raised a hand slightly to still further escalation. "What do you propose?" Reinhard asked. Hamid gestured toward the hills north of the city. "There is a canyon. We believe their nest lies there. We burn it. And if you are wrong, then we die." There was no bravado in his voice, only fact. Reinhard studied him. In another life on another field, they might have killed one another without thought. Now both understood survival required cooperation. Jock scoffed. "We do not march at the side of infidels." Reinhard turned to him slowly, then remain. Jack stared, shocked. "You would defy the Crusade?" "I would live." The words landed heavy. Some of the lesser knights shifted uneasily. Fear had eroded certainty. After long minutes of argument and fractured pride, a compromise was reached. A joint force would march at first light. Small, disciplined, fire-bearing. If treachery occurred, they would slaughter one another there. If not, they would face something far worse. Night fell uneasy once more. This time, the xenomorphs did not wait. They came in the deepest dark when the fires burned low and men's eyes blurred from exhaustion. The first scream came from the outer picket line, a man's voice cut off mid-cry. Then another. Siegfried was awake before the third. He rolled from his bedroll as something crashed into a tent 2 rows over. Canvas tore. A shape burst through, dragging a thrashing body. "Shields!" Reinhard roared. Mercenaries snapped into formation, even half-armored. A xenomorph lunged into the ring of firelight. Up close, its size was unmistakable, taller than a man, shoulders ridged, tail lashing behind it. Siegfried stepped forward with shield raised. The creature struck the shield with enough force to drive him back a pace. Its claws screeched across iron rim. Reinhard stabbed with a short spear toward its neck. The spear glanced. The creature's inner jaws snapped forward, punching through a mercenary's cheek and out the back of his skull. The body dropped instantly. Siegfried roared and hacked at the creature's leg. His blade bit deep, acid sprayed. He twisted away as droplets hissed into the earth. The creature shrieked and leapt backward into darkness. Others moved beyond firelight, circling. Arrows flew. One embedded in a xenomorph's torso. The shaft smoked and dissolved almost immediately. "Fire!" Reinhard shouted. Torches were hurled. Resinous patches on equipment ignited. The creatures recoiled from open flame. For now. After what felt like an hour but could not have been more than minutes, the attackers withdrew. They left 6 mercenaries dead, 2 taken. Siegfried stood breathing hard, chest heaving, sword dripping with both bloods. Reinhard looked at him. "We march at dawn." At first light, the joint force assembled. 40 mercenaries of the Schwarzer Adler, 30 Seljuk infantry under Hamid. A handful of Crusader knights reluctantly attached. Jack did not join. He remained in camp, declaring the venture folly. Siegfried did not argue. They marched north. The canyon entrance yawned like a wound in the earth. The air was wrong there. Heavy. Sweet. Flies clustered thick around the opening. Hamid drew his blade. Reinhard nodded once to Siegfried. "Stay close." They entered. Resin coated the walls thick as pitch. Bodies hung upright in rows now. Dozens. Some moaned faintly. Others were still. Eggs lined the floor in grotesque clusters. One opened as they stepped forward. A facehugger sprang. A Seljuk soldier caught it midair with his shield and slammed it against the wall. It writhed violently before Siegfried cleaved it in 2. Clear fluid splashed against stone. Hiss. Steam. Deeper inside, a chorus of clicking began. The hive had awakened fully. Then the first warrior emerged from the darkness beyond the egg chamber. Then another. And another. They poured from side tunnels in a flood of black chitin and gleaming teeth. "Hold!" Reinhard shouted. The joint line braced. Steel met alien flesh in the flickering light of torches. Men screamed as tails impaled torsos. Acid burned through greaves and into calves. A Seljuk soldier tackled a xenomorph into a pool of fire, both writhing as flames engulfed them. Siegfried fought shoulder to shoulder with Hamid. Their blades rose and fell in brutal rhythm. One creature leapt over the line and landed behind them, seizing a mercenary and biting through his spine. Reinhard pivoted and drove a torch directly into its mouth. The creature convulsed, thrashing wildly before collapsing. But for every one slain, 2 more advanced. And deeper still, in the darkest chamber beyond the eggs, something larger stirred. Something armored more heavily. A Praetorian. Its elongated crest scraped the resin ceiling as it moved forward to defend the heart of the hive. The humans had come to burn. Now they would be tested. And far above the canyon rim, unseen among stone and scrub, a cloaked figure shifted position slightly, adjusting its angle of observation. The trial was reaching its peak. The Praetorian emerged like a living siege engine. Where the warriors were lean and swift, this one was broader through the shoulders, its carapace layer thicker, ridged crest sweeping back like a blackened helm forged by some infernal smith. Its hiss was deeper, resonant, vibrating in the chest more than the ear. The front ranks faltered. Even Siegfried felt it, an animal instinct recoiling from something too large, too deliberate. "Forward!" Reinhard shouted, voice cutting through fear like steel through cloth. "Break the center!" The Praetorian did not charge blindly. It advanced with terrible patience, stepping over its lesser kin. Its tail coiled slowly behind it. A Seljuk spearman thrust. The spear struck the Praetorian's chest and snapped as if made of twigs. The creature seized the man by the skull and lifted him bodily. Its inner jaws punched through his face, exiting in a spray of bone and brain that splattered the resin wall. It flung the corpse into the line. The formation buckled. Warriors surged through the gap. Siegfried slammed his shield into one, staggering it long enough to split its forearm. Acid sprayed across his shield rim, eating into iron. He kicked the creature backward into the torchlight, where another mercenary hacked at its neck joint. Hamid fought like a man already dead. His blade flashed in tight arcs, precise, economical. He cut a tail mid-strike, then drove his dagger into the softer tissue beneath the creature's jaw hinge. "Fire!" he barked in Turkish. Torches flew deeper into the chamber. Flames licked along resin-coated walls, catching and spreading with violent speed. The hive shrieked in layered echoes as smoke thickened. But the Praetorian advanced through the fire. Its outer shell blackened, but did not immediately ignite. It barreled into the line. The impact threw 3 men aside like dolls. Its claws swept horizontally, shearing through a mercenary's torso from hip to shoulder. The two halves fell separately, spilling coils of intestine that steamed in the heat. Siegfried lunged at its flank, blade driving with all his strength into the joint beneath its ribbing. The steel penetrated. Acid erupted. He tore the sword free and twisted away, but not fast enough. Droplets struck his left thigh. He screamed despite himself as pain like molten iron bit into flesh. The mail there dissolved instantly. He smelled his own meat cooking. He stumbled, but did not fall. Reinhard saw it. He grabbed Siegfried by the collar and yanked him backward behind a partial stone outcrop within the chamber. "Bind it!" Reinhard ordered. Siegfried's hands shook as he tore at his shoes, ripping melted mail away from the wound. Flesh bubbled, raw and exposed. He fumbled for the clay jar Reinhard had given him nights before. The ointment. He smeared the thick paste directly into the burn. White-hot agony flared, then dulled to something bearable. He wrapped linen tight around the thigh. Teeth clenched. Beyond the rock, the Praetorian roared. Reinhard did not retreat. He charged it. He seized a fallen torch from the ground and drove it upward beneath the creature's jaw. The Praetorian snapped its inner jaws at him, missing by inches. Flame caught along resinous saliva at its mouth, spreading across its face. It shrieked, thrashing. Hamid saw opportunity. "Now!" he shouted. Together they surged. Siegfried forced himself upright and limped forward, joining the assault. Blades struck the same wound Siegfried had opened. Spears, shortened and braced, drove repeatedly into the softened seam. Acid sprayed in torrents. 2 Seljuk soldiers were caught full in the chest. Their lamellar dissolved. Their flesh followed. They dropped screaming, hands clawing at ribs that were no longer there. Reinhard did not relent. He grabbed a half-burned timber from the wall and jammed it into the Praetorian's gaping mouth, pinning its inner jaws open. "Strike!" he roared. Siegfried raised his sword high and brought it down with everything left in him. The blade punched through the creature's skull beneath the crest. Acid erupted in a final violent spray. Reinhard shoved Siegfried backward even as droplets seared into his own shoulder and neck. The Praetorian convulsed. Its tail thrashed wildly, impaling a mercenary through the abdomen before falling still. Silence did not come. Warriors still fought, but without the Praetorian's central coordination, their attacks grew erratic. The hive burned. Resin ignited fully now, flames racing along the walls and ceiling. Eggs cooked where they lay, splitting open uselessly. "Withdraw!" Hamid ordered. Men dragged wounded where possible. Others were left. There was no time. The survivors stumbled from the canyon into daylight as smoke billowed upward in a black column visible from Dorylaeum itself. Siegfried collapsed to one knee outside the entrance, breathing ragged. His thigh throbbed but held. Reinhard staggered beside him. The acid had eaten through the leather at his shoulder. Beneath it, flesh was raw and smoking. His neck bore a shallow burn that had missed his artery by miracle alone. Hamid counted what remained. Of the 70 who entered, fewer than 30 emerged. He met Reinhard's gaze. "It is not finished," Hamid said quietly. Reinhard looked back toward the smoke-choked canyon. No. From within the burning hive, a low, distant hiss answered as deeper tunnels collapsed and surviving creatures fled through unseen passages. Back in the Crusader camp, Jack Chastain watched the black plume rise and felt vindicated. "See," he told those around him, "they stir demons and call it alliance." Reports came swiftly from scouts. The joint force had suffered terrible losses, but they had burned something. Jack's eyes hardened. "We take the city at dusk," he declared. "Now, while they are weakened." Some knights hesitated. "They are weakened as well," Jack continued, gesturing toward the mercenary camp. "And the Seljuks are broken. The city is ripe." He believed again in opportunity, in glory, in loot. Siegfried lay beneath the cart while the physician rewrapped his thigh. Reinhard sat upright despite blood loss, refusing to recline. When word came that Jock intended to storm Dorlin before nightfall, Siegfried laughed bitterly. "He learns nothing." Reinhard's face was pale but steady. "He sees only gold." Siegfried pushed himself up painfully. "If he enters that city now—" "He will die," Reinhard finished. They both knew it. Inside Dorylaeum, Hamed Abbas ordered evacuation. The fires, they had said, had driven some creatures away, but not all. He had seen movement in the lower cistern tunnels, even as smoke filled the streets. He gathered civilians first, women, children, the old. They would break out southward under cover of the setting sun and ride hard toward Antioch. Better open road than trapped stone. As the sun dipped low, Jock assembled his knights and infantry. He rode past the Schwarzer Adler banner without looking at Reinhard. "Watch," he said coldly, "and learn how nobles reclaim cities." Siegfried spat into the dirt. Reinhard did not respond. The gates of Dorylaeum stood open when Jock's force approached. No defenders lined the walls. No arrows flew. Smoke drifted lazily above rooftops. "Cowards," Jack muttered. They entered, and the gates swung slowly shut behind them. Night fell fully over Anatolia. Outside the walls, the mercenaries and remaining Crusader contingents waited uneasily. From within the city at first there was only silence, then screaming. Not battle cries, not organized, raw, tearing. Horses shrieked, metal clanged, acid hissed against stone. The sound of something massive moving across rooftops echoed above it all. Siegfried closed his eyes briefly. Reinhard gripped the hilt of his sword. Within Dorylaeum, the hive that had survived the canyon fire rose from the depths of cellars and cisterns. They had adapted. They had multiplied. And now, under the command of a new, larger form emerging from the darkness of the city's central bathhouse, a towering praetorian larger even than the first, they fell upon Jack Chastain and his men. This was no longer a battlefield. It was a harvest. And far beyond the walls, upon a rocky height overlooking city and plain alike, 3 cloaked figures now stood instead of one. Their masks reflected the burning streets below. They had seen the mercenary captain stand before death without retreat. They had seen the peasant fight through acid and flame. They had seen the noble charge blindly into doom. The judgment was forming. The false crusade was nearing its reckoning. The screaming did not stop. It changed. At first it was sharp and immediate. Men cut down in the first ambush within the gate corridor. Horses disemboweled before their riders could even dismount. Then it became scattered, echoing through narrow streets and courtyards as groups were separated and hunted. Siegfried stood rigid beyond the walls, listening. He could picture it without seeing. Knights forcing open doors in search of treasure. Boots slipping on blood-slick stone, torches casting wild shadows along arches. Then the drop from above. Inside Dorylaeum, Jack Chastain rallied what remained of his forward column in the market square. Bodies already littered the cobbles, men he had known since boyhood. One knight stumbled toward him, visor torn away, face half melted where acid had splashed. "My lord," the man tried to speak. A tail punched through his back and lifted him off his feet. Jock stared as the black shape behind him withdrew its barb and let the corpse fall. The Praetorian stepped into torchlight, larger than any before. Its crest brushed the overhang of a merchant stall. Its forelimbs ended in claws longer than daggers. Acid dripped from its mandibles, sizzling against stone. For the first time since childhood, Jack felt something he did not know how to master. Fear without pride to cover it. "Form on me," he shouted anyway. A dozen knights closed ranks. They lowered lances. The Praetorian did not hesitate. It charged. The impact shattered the formation. One lance pierced its side. Acid erupted down the shaft, eating through the knight's hands before he could release it. He screamed as his fingers dissolved to bone. Another knight swung for the creature's neck. The blade bounced off the heavy crest with a ringing crack. The Praetorian seized him by the helmet and crushed inward. Metal folded. Skull collapsed. Blood leaked from visor slits. Warriors poured into the square from surrounding alleys. They moved along walls, across roofs, through windows. Jock slashed at one that leapt from a balcony. His blade cut into its shoulder. Acid sprayed, burning across his forearm through mail. He howled as the pain struck, raw and immediate. He dropped his shield. The Praetorian turned its attention toward him. For a heartbeat, Jack thought of his father's halls in France, of feasts and falcon hunts, of silk banners and perfumed courtyards. He had believed he would die in glory. The Praetorian's inner jaws snapped forward. Jacques' head jerked violently as bones shattered. The noble son of Viscount Chastain fell without ceremony, his blood mixing with that of peasants and mercenaries alike. By midnight, organized resistance within Dorylaeum had ceased. Some crusaders fled into cellars and were dragged out one by one. Others barricaded doors that claws eventually tore through. A few tried to scale the walls to escape. They were pulled down from above. The city became a nest. Outside, Siegfried turned as a single survivor staggered from a postern gate before collapsing in the field. He and Reinhard ran to him. The man's abdomen moved unnaturally beneath his surcoat. Inside, the man whispered. They took. His ribs bulged outward. Reinhard swore and drew his dagger. Hold him, he ordered. Siegfried pinned the man's shoulders. The skin split. The chest burst tore free in a spray of blood. Reinhard stabbed downward instantly, killing it before it could orient. Clear fluid splashed across the ground, hissing. The man died seconds later. Silence settled heavily around them. Reinhard stood, breathing hard. We leave, he said. A murmur of agreement rose from the mercenaries. There was no prize here, no ransom, no city to hold, only death breeding in stone. Siegfried looked once toward the walls. Let them rot. Reinhard met his gaze. No, we go home. The words felt strange even as he spoke them. Home. They broke camp before dawn. The Schwarzer Adler moved westward, away from Dorylaeum and the ruin of both Crusader and Seljuk ambitions. They traveled light, wounded supported on carts. Horses that could not bear weight were slaughtered for meat. Behind them, the city smoked faintly under a sky turning pale. From the hills, unseen eyes followed. By midday, they were miles distant, but they were not untracked. Within Dorylaeum, the new Praetorian stalked the emptied streets. It moved to the highest point of the city, the remains of a bathhouse dome cracked by fire, and released a low, resonant call. Warriors gathered below. The hive had lost many in the canyon, but it had gained more within the city. It would not remain contained. The scent of fleeing hosts lingered strong in the air. The hunt shifted west. The road toward Constantinople was long and harsh. The mercenaries marched in disciplined formation. Scouts posted wide despite their reduced numbers. Siegfried limped but refused a cart. His thigh wound festered despite ointment. The skin around the burn reddened and oozed. Each step sent dull pain through him, but he welcomed it. Pain meant he still lived. Reinhard rode rather than walked. The acid burn along his shoulder had stiffened muscle. His neck wound remained shallow but angry red. On the third day of retreat they found the first sign. A rear scout missing. No blood, no cry, just absence. Siegfried felt dread settle deeper. They follow, he said. Yes, Reinhard replied. That night the attack came sooner. Not a full assault, testing. A warrior lunged from scrub brush at the edge of camp and dragged a man into darkness before arrows could find it. Another was seen silhouetted briefly against moonlight before vanishing over a ridge with impossible speed. They were being herded, driven. On the fifth day, as they neared the small town of Taranis, 20 miles from the great walls of Constantinople, the ground itself seemed to vibrate faintly beneath their boots. The town was modest. Stone cottages clustered around a chapel. Farmers fled into streets at the sight of armed men approaching, only to freeze when they saw the terror in the mercenaries' faces. Reinhard did not dismount immediately. We make stand here, he said quietly. Siegfried stared at him. You said home. I said we go home. He looked toward the town. If they pass through this place unchallenged, they will multiply again. Siegfried understood. He did not argue. They began fortifying Taranis at once. Wagons overturned to block narrow approaches. Oil barrels dragged into Central Square. Townsfolk armed with farm tools evacuated eastward under escort of a handful of mounted mercenaries. As dusk fell, scouts returned breathless. They come, one said. How many? Reinhard asked. The scout swallowed. Enough. The first shapes appeared at the edge of the tree line just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Black silhouettes against dying light. 1, 3, 10. More behind. At their center, moving with terrible deliberation, the Praetorian, not the first, larger, its crest marked with scars from canyon fire. It had survived. Siegfried tightened his grip on his sword. Reinhard stepped forward into the square, drawing his blade despite his injuries. "Hold ranks!" he shouted. The Schwarzer Adler formed one last time. 30 men, perhaps less. The creatures advanced, no screams now, no hesitation, only the closing of distance. The final stand at Tyrannus began under a sky turning black, and far beyond the field, on a distant rise overlooking the town, 3 armored figures activated devices upon their wrists. Green symbols flickered. The experiment was nearing conclusion. They would judge what they had witnessed. They would decide what survived. The first impact at Tyrannus broke like a storm against stone. The xenomorph vanguard did not charge in a single wave. They advanced in staggered arcs spreading wide to test the barricades. Their movement was unnervingly coordinated, 2 drawing attention at the center, while others scaled the outer cottages, claws finding purchase in mortar seams as easily as bark. "Shields!" Siegfried barked, voice raw but steady. The Schwarzer Adler locked into a crescent before the central square. Wagons chained wheel to wheel behind them. Oil-soaked rags smoldered in iron braziers at their flanks. A warrior leapt from a rooftop. Crossbow bolts struck it midair. One punched through its ribbed torso. The shaft dissolved instantly as acid hissed. The creature landed regardless, claws scything across a mercenary's shield. The iron rim held for a heartbeat, then a tail punched through the man's thigh. He collapsed screaming as the barb withdrew slick with blood. Siegfried stepped into the gap and cut low at the creature's knee joint. The blade bit. Acid splashed across cobble in his greave. He pivoted away as the stone sizzled and pitted. "Left flank!" someone shouted. 2 warriors burst through a cottage door in a spray of splintered wood. A Seljuk survivor, one of Hamid's men who had chosen to remain, threw a torch into their path. Flame caught along resin smeared on their limbs. One shrieked and thrashed, colliding with its kin. Both stumbled long enough for spears to drive into their chests. Acid rained. A mercenary took it full across the face. His scream turned to a gurgle as skin sloughed from cheekbone. He fell clawing at eyes that were no longer there. Reinhard moved through the line like a hammer, directing, striking where needed. His injured shoulder bled through bandage, but he did not slow. "Give ground by paces," he commanded. "Do not break." They yielded step by step into the square, drawing the creatures inward where oil waited. The Praetorian entered the town last. It did not rush. It stepped over a burning corpse without flinching, crest reflecting firelight in warped glints. Its tail traced a slow arc behind it, tapping stone as if tasting. Siegfried saw it and felt the air leave his lungs. "Reinhard," he said quietly. Reinhard turned and nodded once. "On me." The Praetorian advanced straight through the center, ignoring the skirmish at the flanks. A warrior lunged ahead of it. Siegfried met it with shield and drove his sword up beneath its jaw. The creature convulsed and fell, acid splashing across his shield boss, eating through the wood. Then the Praetorian was upon them. It struck with its forelimb and smashed a wagon aside as if it were straw. Chains snapped. The barricade split. Men were thrown sprawling. Reinhard seized an oil barrel and heaved it forward with a roar, rolling it toward the creature's feet. "Now!" he shouted. Torches flew. The barrel burst into flame. Fire climbed the Praetorian's legs, licking up along its abdomen. It shrieked, not in panic but in rage, and charged through the blaze. It hit Reinhard squarely. They crashed together, man and monster, rolling across burning cobbles. Its claws tore through his mail at the hip. Blood darkened his surcoat. He drove his dagger into the softer seam beneath its forelimb again and again, each strike sending acid across his gauntlets. Siegfried reached them and hacked at the creature's tail as it whipped toward Reinhard's throat. The blade cut halfway through. Acid sprayed across Siegfried's shield arm. Pain flared as droplets ate through leather and into skin. The Praetorian seized Reinhard by the shoulder and lifted him. Siegfried saw its inner jaws extend. He moved without thought. He threw himself forward and rammed his sword two-handed up through the creature's mouth, past the outer mandibles and into the throat beyond. The steel punched deep. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then acid erupted like a fountain. Siegfried tore backward as the blade dissolved in his grip. His hands burned. He dropped the hilt and stumbled away. The Praetorian convulsed violently, crushing Reinhard in its grasp as it thrashed. Reinhard drove his dagger one final time into its eye ridge. The creature's grip slackened. It toppled sideways in a crash of chitin and flame. Reinhard fell with it. For a moment there was only the roar of fire and the hiss of acid-eating stone. Then the remaining warriors hesitated. Their coordination faltered. Siegfried seized a fallen spear and rallied the line. "Press them!" he roared. The mercenaries surged with what little strength remained. Blades rose and fell in brutal rhythm. One by one the remaining creatures were cut down, burned, or driven into flame. When it ended, only the crackle of burning timber and the labored breathing of men remained. Siegfried stumbled to Reinhard's side. The Praetorian's carcass smoked beside him, its blood carving a shallow crater in the square. Reinhard lay on his back, armor eaten through at hip and shoulder. Blood pooled dark beneath him. His eyes were open. "Siegfried," he said softly, "I'm here." Reinhard tried to sit. Pain stopped him. He coughed once, red at the lips. "You held." "We held." Reinhard managed a faint smile. "Good." Behind them, the surviving mercenaries, fewer than 20 now, looked outward as shapes appeared beyond the burning perimeter. Not xenomorphs, tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in shifting distortion that shimmered in the heat haze. They stepped into visibility as if choosing to be seen, armor of dark metal layered across their forms. Masks expressionless, lenses glowing faint green. Each carried weapons unlike any forged by human hand. Siegfried stared. What new devilry? The nearest predator raised a wrist. A tri-laser shimmered across the smoking field, then snapped toward a wounded warrior crawling from a collapsed barn. A crack of energy split the air. The xenomorph's skull exploded in a spray of chitin and acid that never touched the ground, vaporized mid-fall. Another predator moved with terrifying speed, leaping atop a cottage roof and firing a net that expanded mid-air, entangling a fleeing warrior. The net constricted, slicing through exoskeleton until the creature fell in pieces. Within minutes, the remaining xenomorphs around Tyrannus were annihilated with clinical precision. The mercenaries stood frozen. Siegfried knelt beside Reinhard, one hand on his captain's chest as if to shield him. The largest of the predators approached. It stopped a few paces from Reinhard. Its mask tilted slightly. A low clicking sound emanated from within. Reinhard met its gaze without flinching. Even bleeding into the stones, he did not look away. The predator extended a device from its wrist. A beam of scanning light passed slowly over Reinhard's body. It paused at the dagger still clutched in his hand, paused at the acid burns, paused at the Praetorian corpse beside him. Another click. The predator turned its head toward its companions. A decision passed silently between them. Siegfried rose, stepping between the creature and Reinhard. "You will not take him," he said hoarsely. The predator looked at him. For a moment, Siegfried felt utterly small beneath that inhuman gaze. Then the creature reached forward, not in attack, but in deliberate motion. It struck Siegfried across the chest with the back of its hand, sending him sprawling several paces away without drawing blood. Not killing, dismissing. The predator knelt beside Reinhard. Reinhard's breathing was shallow now. "Do not waste him," he murmured, perhaps to Siegfried, perhaps to the thing before him. The predator produced a small cylindrical device. It pressed it briefly against Reinhard's neck. A hiss. Reinhard's body went limp, not dead but stilled. The predator lifted him effortlessly. Siegfried dragged himself upright. "No!" He staggered forward, but another predator stepped into his path, wrist blades extending with a metallic rasp inches from his throat. The message was clear. The largest predator turned once more toward Siegfried. Its mask tilted. Acknowledgement. Then it activated its cloaking field. Light bent around it. Reinhard's unconscious form shimmered and vanished with it. One by one, the others cloaked as well. Within seconds, the square of Tyrannus held only burning wreckage, dead xenomorphs and stunned survivors. Siegfried stood alone where Reinhard had lain. The night wind carried the smell of ash and acid. He sank slowly to his knees. The Crusade had promised glory, land, salvation. Instead, it had brought monsters from beyond the sky, and taken the only man he had ever truly followed. In the distance, faint against the stars, a shape moved silently upward into darkness. The false crusade had ended, but the memory of it would burn far longer than the fires of Tyrannus. Dawn came thin and gray over Tyrannus. Smoke drifted low across the square where the Praetorian had fallen. Its carcass had collapsed inward during the night, exoskeleton split and warped by heat and its own blood. The acid had eaten a shallow basin into the cobbles. Rainwater would one day fill it, and no one would remember why the stone there never held moss. Siegfried had not slept. He sat where Reinhard had fallen, staring at the scorched mark left behind. Around him, the remnants of the Schwarzer Adler moved like ghosts. They counted again. 18. From 70 who had entered the canyon. From over 100 who had marched from Nicaea weeks before. 18. One of the younger mercenaries approached hesitantly. His beard was barely full, his left ear half gone from an acid splash in the night. "What now?" the young man asked. Siegfried did not answer immediately. He looked east, where the road led toward Constantinople and safety behind its immense walls. Then west, where the crusade continued toward Antioch and Jerusalem, toward more death. He remembered Reinhard's words. "We go home." "They are gone," another mercenary muttered, glancing at the empty air where the armored giants had stood. "Taken," the young one corrected quietly. Siegfried rose slowly, his thighs stiff but bearable beneath layered bandage. "They judged him," he said. "Judged?" "They watched," Siegfried replied. "From the hills, from the night. He had felt it more than seen it, the sense of being observed even before the canyon assault. "They saved him," the young mercenary said, uncertain. Siegfried's jaw tightened. "They did not save him for mercy." Silence followed that. In the fields beyond town, townsfolk crept back from where they had hidden among vineyards and shallow ravines. They stared wide-eyed at the carnage. Some crossed themselves, others whispered prayers in Greek. A few knelt beside the fallen mercenaries and wept despite not knowing their names. By mid-morning, a column appeared on the eastern road. Banners bearing the double-headed eagle of Byzantium snapped in the wind. Heavy cavalry in lamellar and scale rode at their head, disciplined and unhurried. Behind them, infantry marched with large clay siphons mounted on wagons. Greek fire. Siegfried narrowed his eyes. At their forefront rode a man in battered Frankish mail, Jan Barbier. He dismounted before reaching the square and approached alone, hands open. His face was drawn, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness and something deeper. "You live," Jan said quietly. "For now," Siegfried answered. Behind Jan, a Byzantine officer studied the smoldering remains with controlled fascination. "We saw the smoke," Jan continued. "I told them what I found in the canyon." Siegfried regarded him. "You led them here." "I led them toward the hive," Jan corrected. They burned what remained in the lower tunnels before dawn. He gestured toward the distant hills where blackened rock still smoked faintly. "They used their fire," he added, nodding toward the clay siphons. Siegfried's gaze flicked to the Byzantines. "They come too late." Jan's expression shifted. "Where's your captain?" Siegfried did not answer. He did not need to. Jan followed his gaze to the empty, acid-scarred stones. "I saw them," Jan said after a long pause. "On the ridge." "So did I." "They are not demons," Jan whispered, "nor angels." "No," Jan swallowed. "Why take him?" Siegfried looked down at his own scarred hands. "Because he did not break." The Byzantine officer approached then, speaking in measured Latin. "We will cleanse the town and secure the road. Constantinople cannot allow this so near." His eyes lingered on the xenomorph carcasses with thinly veiled unease. "These creatures," he continued carefully, "must not be spoken of widely. Panic spreads faster than plague." Siegfried almost laughed. Panic had already swept 2 armies into ruin. But he understood. Empires survived on controlled truths. By noon, Greek fire arced from siphons into the remaining structures where resin had taken hold. Flame clung unnaturally to walls, burning hotter and longer than oil alone. The last traces of the hive in Tyrannus were reduced to ash. Siegfried stood apart as it burned. He did not watch the flames. He watched the sky. Somewhere above, beyond sight, Reinhard lived, not as a captive in chains of iron, but as something else. Judged worthy. Taken. The thought did not comfort him. He gathered the surviving Schwarzer Adler beneath the town's cracked chapel arch. "We returned to Constantinople," he said simply. "And then?" the young mercenary asked. Siegfried considered. The crusade still marched east. Nobles still chased Jerusalem. But the coalition that had stood before Dorylaeum was shattered. Jock lay headless in a ruined city. Farah Jassim lay broken in its streets. Hamid Abbas had vanished southward with refugees, his fate uncertain. The war of faith continued, but their war was over. "We go home," Siegfried said at last. They buried their dead that evening beyond the vineyards, simple graves marked with stones. No priest officiated. The few who had survived were too shaken to speak. Siegfried placed Reinhardt's black eagle banner folded at the head of an empty grave, a marker without a body. Jan approached quietly as the last light faded. "I will ride with you as far as the capital," he said. "Why?" Jan's gaze dropped. "I failed in what I meant to do." "To kill Jock?" Jan did not deny it. Siegfried studied him. "He is dead." "Not by my hand." "Does that matter?" Jan hesitated. "Yes." Siegfried understood that too. Some debts could not be transferred. They rode east at dawn with Byzantine escort. The road to Constantinople felt different now, less like retreat, more like escape from something that did not belong to Earth. When the great walls of the city finally rose in the distance, vast and impenetrable, the surviving mercenaries felt a weight lift from their chests. Behind stone and empire, perhaps monsters could not reach. But Siegfried knew better. Monsters had worn human faces long before the black creatures had crawled from eggs. As they approached the gates, he looked once more toward the western horizon. The plains of Anatolia stretched endless and indifferent. Two armies had clashed there in the name of God. Neither had understood they were being observed, tested, measured. The false crusade had not been about Jerusalem. It had been about proving who would stand when hell itself rose from the earth. And in the silence of space above, aboard a vessel unseen by human eye, Reinhard Ulrich lay within a chamber of cold metal and dim light. Strange instruments hummed around him. His wounds were sealed by alien devices that knit flesh without scar. When his eyes opened, he did not cry out. He looked at the towering armored figures observing him through transparent panels. And even there, far from earth, far from banner and blood, he did not lower his gaze. The hunt was over, but another trial had begun.